Hello, everyone, and welcome back down here to the Gamer's Den with me, your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. We are continuing on with the Occultist Guide, taking a look at their Evocation spell list, or specifically the spells that I think are going to be the most ideal and get you the most bang for your buck with the particular build that we're going for. Considering we're focusing on more of a melee build for the Occultist, spellcasting is less of a concern here, though because it's something you get, it's tied to your implements and thus is still shared with your implement powers, your focus powers. It's still worthwhile to go over them because this is another tool in your arsenal, another tool in the kit overall that can help you overcome a wide variety of encounters, as you are capable of more than just combat. Well, hell, I'd say with good roleplay, a fighter is capable of more than just combat, but with the different spells and focus powers that you have access to on top of your skills and other class abilities, you're capable of quite a few things. But your implements are going to be the most important piece of equipment that you will carry, considering, again, it's where you get your focus powers, it's where you store your mental focus points, and it's how you are able to cast your spells at full power. But with all that preamble said and aside, we're going to go ahead and get rolling on into this. So, for 0 level on the Evocation spell list, what we are looking at for this selection is the Light spell. The casting time is a standard action, range is touch, the target is whatever object you touch. You touch an object to make it glow with light like a torch, putting normal lighting out to 20 feet, with each 20 feet decreasing 1 step. So normal light will go to dim light from 21 feet on through 40 feet. And then that goes from dim lighting to dark at 41 feet through 60 feet. And outside of that, the light doesn't reach any further. You really can't see out past that. And really, this is a fairly handy spell for 0 level. It's not one you're going to be using all the time, especially as you get to higher levels, but with some creative uses, you can get some real mileage out of this spell. Although I will say, if you're somewhere like the Plane of Shadow or down in the Underdark, this can be a great way of sounding the dinner bell. Well, as it were, because, well, it's a light source in a place where there's really not a whole lot of natural light. You're going to stand out pretty hard. And this spell does diminish in its usefulness somewhat if you have party members with dark vision, say like a dwarf. But even still, I still think this is a solid spell to have as a selection there because there's a variety of uses that you can get out of it. Your mileage may vary, however. But our first level spell is one that kind of takes a little bit of a dive in terms of the overall quality. First level evocation spells, there's not a lot of really great options. I mean, we have Shocking Grasp, but it's a standard action to use it where, you grasp somebody and electrocute them, when really that standard action eats into all your melee attack options. So you're probably better off just making an attack. When it comes to Burning Hands, though, casting time is a standard action, range is a 15-foot cone-shaped burst, reflex save for half damage, and you let loose a blast of fire from your fingertips, dealing 1d4 points of damage per caster level, topping out at 5d4. The reason why this isn't totally useless is that, it's a first level spell, so grant you want to maximize the value out of your spell casting, but with Burning Hands, you can light flammable materials on fire, and depending on the situation, that can be really, really effective. I keep coming back to seagoing campaigns where you're on a ship. If your vessel is attacked, since we're a melee build anyways, you board the enemy boat, you use Burning Hands, you burn up the rigging, the sails, or even just light the ship on fire. Now your opponents have to deal with that, giving you time to get away, especially if the rigging goes up. And if you're in a campaign with gunpowder, well, the possibilities just multiply. Granted, that also includes possibilities of catastrophe consuming both ships in a hellfiery explosion, but hey, there are few greater ways to go out than taking out the whole party yourself as well as your opponents. But bear in mind, though, that for Pathfinder and 3rd edition Dungeons and Dragons, that fire resistance and fire immunity are the most common types of immunities or resistances. And the fact that this is 5d4 The max that you're getting out of this is 20 points of damage. And even if, when you're going up against an opponent with a fire resistance of 5, your average is floating around about the 10 to 12 range for damage. Well, 5 points out of that average, you're dropping down to 5 to 7 or so. That's not a lot of damage. And even without the resistances, once you get up to the higher levels, 20 points of damage can be tanked and eaten up really easy by a lot of different creatures before we even get into all of that. So you're probably better off with making melee attacks and using your first level spell slots for other spells rather than burning hands. But from there, we have more available to you. For the second level spell, we have Frostfall. The casting time is a standard action. Range is a nice close 25 feet plus 5 feet every 2 levels in a 5-foot area burst. And the duration for it is 1 round per level, and Fortitude does partially negate. You create an area that bursts with a chilling frost, dealing 2d6 cold damage to all creatures within it. Creatures initially damaged must make a Fortitude save or be staggered for 1 round. So this one is okay. This is an okay spell. Frost damage, resistance to frost damage is not as common, and the fact that it can stagger is nice. I would probably make this a good choice rather than an okay choice if it had a wider area of effect. If it were a 10-foot burst, something where you could catch, possibly 6 creatures or reliably catch 4 creatures. Otherwise, you have to target this in a really tight area where enemies are packed together, which does not come up a whole lot. But the fact that you can still stagger an opponent even for 1 round is nice. And even if they save against it, you're still dealing some kind of damage to them. So that's actually not too bad, especially for second level. But as we've covered already with these different spell lists from the different schools of magic, you probably have some better choices. But this is not a bad one to have at all, especially if you're going with more of a spell-casting occultist. Then at third level, we have Tiny Hut. It's a classic, and it's come up on other spell lists before. Casting time is a standard action. Range is 20 feet, with the effect is a 20-foot radius sphere centered on your location. And the duration is 2 hours a level, so pretty quickly this can end up lasting you quite a while. You fit yourself and 9 other medium-sized creatures inside an opaque sphere that hides you all. Its interior temperature stays relatively comfortable for you, though the outside temperature will begin to affect it depending on how hot or cold it may be, and you can see out of it while attackers cannot see in. They can still make attacks through it if they know you're in there, but because you have concealment, they have a pretty solid mischance, and you can fire out of it. And since you can see your opponents and they can't see you, this gives you a fairly ideal defensive option, especially if you're coupling this with other spells like using Stonewall to make some fortifications to really give you not only a cover that renders you basically unable to be observed by your opponents, but then you have an actual physical barrier with which to defend yourself. So with a decent combination of different spells, you can create a fairly impressive defense point, both to rest at and to take on some overwhelming numbers of opponents, since, the whole situation just depends. Point being, this is a great spell to throw down to create comfortable conditions where your party can reliably, comfortably rest and recover from whatever rigors of adventure you may be going on. Then moving along from that, at fourth level, we have etheric shards, and I actually really, really like this spell. Casting time is a standard action. Range is 100 feet plus 10 feet per level, so pretty long range. Well, I guess technically this counts as medium, but still, this is hefty in comparison to most of the occultist spell lists. The target is at 1 10-foot cube per level, and the duration is an incredible 1 hour per level. Reflex will partially negate this, although reflex saves kind of come up a couple of times with this spell. You harden ethereal substance into invisible razors. Moving through an area of etheric shards halves movement, even for incorporeal creatures. That doesn't come up a whole lot. There's not a lot of spells that do that. Entering an affected 5-foot cube deals 1d8 points of slashing and piercing damage. That means the damage counts as both slashing and piercing, not that you're doing 1d8 slashing and 1d8 piercing at the same time. It's just 1d8 that counts as both slashing and piercing. And it triggers a reflex save, or the target will take 1 bleed damage as well. This bleed damage stacks with itself and other bleed damage sources. Standing still prevents damage, but defending and attacking, if you're in the square, will cause damage and trigger those reflex saves. Bull rushing a creature into the area gives a -4 penalty on reflex saves to them. If the creature can see the shards, they get a +4 bonus to their saves. Creatures with trap finding can find the shards, but they can't do anything to disable them. So most of your incorporeal creatures are going to be undead. Undead do not take bleed damage, but there are some spells and effects that different creatures can use to make themselves incorporeal. So living beings that are incorporeal moving through this area will take bleed damage from it, because it's hardened ethereal substance, so that can still affect them. So this spell is awesome. This is great for laying down traps, for area control and dealing extra damage and racking up bleed damage. Like, I mean, a 10-foot cube per level, by level 10, that's 10-foot cubes. That's a huge area for you to cover, and you can just scatter and pepper everything out, so that way they have to move carefully through this essentially a minefield of razor sharp death. This is awesome. Absolutely a spell you want on your list. This, even though we're focused more on melee and getting in close with our opponents, this is great battlefield control to have. And again, I can't stress enough that the fact that this affects incorporeal creatures is awesome. So pick this one up. It's absolutely worth it. And then for 5th level, we have another great spell, Wall of Force, a classic that goes back to quite a ways through D&D. The casting time is a standard action, range is 25 feet plus 5 feet for every 2 levels, and the area it affects is a 10-foot square wall per level. So the more levels you get, the bigger a wall you can make. The duration is only 1 round per level, but still fairly worthwhile overall. You create an invisible wall of pure force with a hardness of 30 and 20 hit points per caster level. It can be damaged by attacks, supernatural abilities, spells, although Disintegrate will automatically destroy the wall of force. This blocks ethereal creatures, though Teleport, Dimension Door, and similar spells will go through it, as do gaze attacks, such as a Medusa's Petrifying Gaze. That will go through it and still affect you. The spell can be made permanent with the permanent spell. So if you were to couple this with the Tiny Hut spell from just a few spell levels back, you're really racking up how much of a defensive option that you have within a comfortable resting zone. And you can essentially shape the Wall of Force however you need to. You're only limited by your caster level, affecting the area that you can, lay the wall down over. That and the fact that you can make this permanent can help you really shore up the defenses for wherever your home base is. Honestly, there's a lot of options for this spell. You can make invisible bridges out of this. It's not just limited to being a defensive wall to block things. You can use this to cross all kinds of terrain and leave a relatively invisible bridge that your opponents may not readily detect. Well, if they're using True Seeing, but you get the idea. There's a lot of creative uses for this particular spell. It's like with most spells, really, limited only by your imagination. So definitely think up the different clever ways that you can put these things to work. But for our 6th and final spell level for the Occultist, we have another great one to cap things off with, and that's Blade Barrier. Casting time is a standard action, range is at 100 feet plus 10 feet per level, and the area is a wall of whirling blades up to 20 feet long per level, or a ringed wall of whirling blades with a radius of up to 5 feet per 2 levels. The duration is 1 round per level. Either shape will be 20 feet high. Spinning blades of pure force come into existence, forming an immovable wall of whirling death. Creatures moving through the wall will take 1d6 damage per caster level, maxing out at 15d6, with a reflex save for half. This provides cover, which is going to be a +4 bonus to your AC and a +2 bonus to reflex saves. This applies to attacks going through it. So if somebody tries to stab at you, fire an arrow through, you get these bonuses. Even if they throw a fireball at you, this will give you a +2 bonus to your reflex save. So overall, this spell can be used to defend, it can be used for offense, and also for more area control. And the fact that it's made up of solid force means it's just doing physical damage, which, well, when it comes to creatures with damage reduction, that'll be unfortunate, but this does a hefty amount of damage, and spell resistance doesn't apply to this particular spell like it might say for Burning Hands. So that's one less thing for you to have to worry about overcoming. And that's, especially once you're up to the mid to higher levels, spell resistance gets to be a fairly consistent thing for you to worry about overall. So having a spell that ignores that and just starts dealing damage is just a wood chipper of death. Feed your opponents through it. Scatter this with the etheric shards spell. Really make them feel punished, trying to work their way through this just maze of invisible razor wire and a wall of just spinning tornado blades of doom. Turn them into mincemeat. But these are just some of the evocation spells. There are others on these lists, and like I said before, we are looking at the mechanical effectiveness. What is going to be the most bang for your buck from a mathematical standpoint, looking at the overall statistics and meta for the game overall. But that's still no substitute for creative role play and using the different spells in clever fashion. So, if you liked today's video, go on down there, hit the like button, let me know in the comments down below. And what spells would you consider adding to this list or substituting out? Or if you hated it and completely want to upend this list overall, well, still, go down there, do that, hit the dislike button and let me know, and let's engage in the discussion here. Certainly, I'm open to all kinds of wonderful ideas. I mean, I'm a DM. I have to listen to the players and take their suggestions once in a while. I'd run out of friends and who'd be willing to play really fast if I didn't. But I digress. If you did enjoy today's video, though, and you want to see more, well, good news, there are going to be 2 more popping up over here. One is something the almighty, all-knowing, and all-seeing, and all-powerful Google has decided that you will enjoy as well. The other is just another video I've done recently, but hey, I think it's going to be fantastic for you as well. Or, if this hasn't been your first stop here at the Gamers Den, then you must be enjoying something overall here at the channel. Why not go on down there and hit the subscribe button and become a regular member? Join us and be alumni here at the Gamers Den. Certainly, we'd all be happy to have you. But with that said, I've been your host, Jordan, your Master of Lore and Storyteller Extraordinaire. Thank you all so very much for your time, and you all have yourselves a good night.